Good afternoon, and welcome to Sporty's webinar on flight simulators, what pilots need to know. Our presenter today is Chris McGonegle, and he is a product manager here at Sporty's Pilot Shop. He is a resident flight sim geek and our go-to when it comes to everything flight sim. One quick reminder is that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted for review later this week. So if you get distracted or want to go back and go over some of the material, you can do so by going to sportys.com/webinars. With that, I'll hand it over to Chris. Chris, thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you, Doug. My name's Chris McGonegle, and today we are going to discuss how a flight simulator can sharpen our flying skills. We'll cover what hardware and software options we have at our disposal with a dedicated focus on the new Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 program. And as Doug alluded to, I'm the product manager here at Sporty's Pilot Shop and also a graduate of the University of Cincinnati's Aviation Academy. I've spent hundreds of hours in a Cessna 172, so I like to think that I have a solid grasp on the realism and abilities a simulator can offer to the aviation community. So today we're going to cover three separate categories of a flight simulator. Number one, what physical components make a simulator? Second, we'll discuss how a simulator can best be used to keep the rust off of active pilots, while also highlighting the opportunities a flight sim can offer. And lastly, we'll conclude with additional training pieces and an overview of the Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 program. The first flight simulator was the Link, predominantly used in World War II. The Link trainer allegedly evolved from organ and player piano technology and was the bane of fighter pilots training. It was rumored that most pilots would prefer flying a combat mission rather than logging a training session in the Link. And as you can see, it's a pretty elementary simulator right in front of us. This is actually a home-built flight simulator designed and constructed by one of our customers. Now, today's webinar won't cover how to design and build this state-of-the-art home simulator, but we will cover what minimum hardware is required to build an effective home sim. So let's discuss what is needed for a flight sim. First part is a computer with a monitor to run software. Next, we need the software itself. And lastly, we'll need flight control hardware to give the system inputs. So let's say we're starting fresh and purchasing a computer solely for a simulator purpose. In that case, the recommended specifications are 64-bit processor and operating system, Windows 10 or Mac OS X 10.11 or newer, 3.5 gigahertz or faster processor, a 16 gigabyte RAM memory, a video card with at least 4 gigabytes of video RAM, internet connection, and lastly, 64 gigabytes of available storage space. Comparable models from big box stores hit all these requirements and start around $250. Keep in mind these are the starting point for a flight simulator, and we'll get into more details on all these features later on. I like to think of these pieces as the organs of the system. Now, in partnership with another Cincinnati-based company, Sporty's is proud to offer two flight simulator-focused PCs that are both more than compatible with today's flight simulator software. The standard flight simulator computer starts us off with an Intel i5 6-core processor and NVIDIA GTX 1650 4 gigabyte video RAM graphics card, 16 gigabytes of RAM, a 240 gigabyte solid state hard drive, and solid state means no disks spinning internally, which significantly reduces heat production and lengthens the life of the product. A 600 watt power supply, dual band Wi-Fi card to allow streaming options, a wired keyboard and mouse, and a 27-inch monitor screen with 2560 by 1440 resolution. The deluxe flight simulator computer improves on the standard with an AMD Ryzen 7 3800X processor, a Radeon Pro WX 7100 8 gigabyte video RAM graphics card, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and a 32-inch monitor. And again, if those numbers or descriptions flew right over your head like they initially did mine, I'm going to briefly cover those in a few slides, so just hold tight. We also have a great article on sporties.com/blog titled Microsoft Flight Sim 2020, What Pilots Need to Know, where we really get into the weeds of what those components do. The way I like to explain it is the difference in the standard flight sim computer. It will take care of flying on the default settings of most simulators. If you want to ramp up the system and incorporate, say, live traffic, high fidelity imagery of buildings and ground features, and demand for a high frame per second rate, then the Deluxe is what you're looking for. These price out at $1,695 and $2,795. For more information or questions, please visit the product pages on sporties.com. As of today, there are 4 prominent flight simulator software programs available. As we cover these different software options, I'd like to use the analogy that software is the brain of the system. And first up, we have X-Plane 11. Overall, a great program and one we've carried in our store for years. A couple pros. There's a free X-Plane 11 demo online, so you're able to test it out and see how the program operates with your computer system before you spend any money. Another pro is X-Plane 11 supports ForeFlight without an add-on or digital hoops to jump through. If you are on the same Wi-Fi and edit a couple simple settings, your aircraft's location and performance in the simulator will be reflected on the ForeFlight app. This feature alone makes it a strong contender for anyone interested in flight simulation. Another selling point for X-Plane is the third-party network is very expansive. A lot of pilots will come up to me and say, I want this exact airplane with this avionics set. How do I digitally get it? And X-Plane is usually the system to offer these distinct airplanes. The vendors have had 4.5 years to design aircraft, airports, or weather programs to complement this seasoned product, and some other simulators don't necessarily offer that ability. Another large pro is that X-Plane 11 will work with a Macintosh computer and is one of the few systems that does. Lastly, X-Plane also has a mobile application, but I wouldn't qualify it as a training method. Prepared version 5 was released in April of last year and is a more structured and mission-driven program. Sure, you can buy the basic version and fly around your home airport, but this program was designed with training in mind. Developer Lockheed Martin describes its platform as a, quote, proven simulation framework application that immerses the user in a rich and interactive environment, end quote. The software is well supported and fans are very vocal with their praise. Cons are it's a little difficult to purchase with packages ranging from an academic license for $60, ranging all the way up to $2,500 for the Professional Plus license. I highly recommend researching all the available packages and understanding the different levels of performance each one offers. Prepared is not compatible with the Macintosh operating system and is the most expensive program, but for someone who is committed to learning from a simulator, it is a serious contender. Microsoft released its 10th edition of the Flight Simulator program on October 13th of 2006. There have been multiple updates to bring new aircraft and systems up to speed with its competitors, but that foundation was laid over 14 years ago. Some pros associated with Microsoft Flight Simulator are a large batch of included aircraft when you purchase this system, 30 craft ranging from commercial airliners to single-engine airplanes and helicopters. A couple cons are graphics and authenticity of use like the other systems. Another speed bump that may apply in certain scenarios is that MFS will only work on Macintosh systems if they have an Intel processor, so keep that in mind. The largest con of this system is that it's no longer serviceable. So if you have a problem or a question, you are left to the online forums for assistance. And then the resounding elephant in the room is that it has been eclipsed by the latest version of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Last Thursday marked 6 months to the day that the new Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 program went live on the consumer market, and the interest has been overwhelming. In that half year, there have been millions of hours logged on this program, and it seems every day that new customers are committing. You may notice that it's quite difficult to find certain flight simulator yokes along with other hardware components online these days, and I attribute much of that reason to this program right here. MSFS 2020 runs on PC, and rumor indicates it will be compatible with Xbox within the next 6 months, expanding accessibility to an even larger populace. This program packs a lot of great features and abilities, but it's not all roses, and we're going to dive into some of the growing pains this young program has developed towards the end of today's presentation. But because it is the new kid on the block, let's look at what Microsoft recommends CPU-wise. For such a powerful system, the drawback is we'll need qualified computing power to provide the high-performance digital world that this program was designed to build. I'll briefly explain what each row means and hopefully demystify some of these terms. Minimum operating system version. This is pretty self-explanatory. Program will only run on Windows 10. CPU stands for Central Processing Unit, and this is the speed with which the computer can receive your input, analyze it, and come to the conclusion of how it will affect the current scenario. These tasks happen thousands of times a second, but the faster the CPU, increase the frequency exponentially. CPUs have different amounts of cores, and the more cores your processor contains, the faster it can handle the tasks, which lead to smoother operation. GPU stands for Graphics Card Unit, and this is the piece that's able to visually project what the CPU has just relayed the changes to the scenario would look like. VRAM is Video RAM, and designates how much short-term video or imagery the computer can store, whereas RAM is how much short-term data the computer can store. Plain and simple, the more the better. HDD stands for hard disk drive and is the amount of storage your computer has. You will need a comfortable amount to back up and store sceneries, airplanes, updates, and cache portions of the globe from when you were flying. Just to give you a hint of sizes you'll need, the deluxe download from Microsoft Flight Simulator runs about 110 gigabytes. Lastly, bandwidth is the speed with which your internet provider is providing information. Hardwire is always better than Wi-Fi, and these speeds really come into play if you're continuously receiving data from the web. Think live weather or multiplayer with other flight simmers, or live traffic with real-world aircraft actively populated into the simulator. In wrapping up, I like to think of these three groups of columns as percentages. The minimum specs would serve as 33%. Recommended specs are 66, and the ideal specs are a full 100. Now, when I built the simulator we use here at Sporty's, we constructed a system I would rate at about 92%, so it's not the top of the line, but also enough power to work well and keep up with updates for a while. Financially, I like to associate it towards wringing out a wet rag. The first half requires a little effort, but it gets more and more difficult as you squeeze out those last few percentages. It's the same with the cost of a computer. It will get exponentially more expensive for each percentage you get closer to the ideal specs. For references of how much it would cost to design a system like ours with a 92-point rating, ours invoiced for roughly $1,600. The standard computer we discussed earlier, I would rank at 93 points, and the deluxe computer would be a 97. Towards the end of this webinar, I'm going to circle back to the Microsoft Flight Sim program and really get granular, highlighting some of the unique features and benefits. Continue with software options. Next, we have a very notable mention. Infinite Flight is a mobile-only platform you can download from the App Store or Google Play. This program will only run on phones or tablets and is an extremely valuable training tool, in addition towards enjoyable simulated flight. My biggest takeaway from the hours I've spent using the Infinite Flight app is the ability to link with ForeFlight and better understand the abilities of my EFB. Infinite Flight won't be able to strengthen my ability to flare the airplane in a strong crosswind, but it will allow me to practice the preparation phase of flight planning, climb and descent profiles, and airspace navigation. As weather abilities are updated in the program, understanding the IFR system and flying simulated flights down to minimums will be an extremely helpful tool to strengthening flows and workload practice. In July of 2018, the Experimental Aviation Association, or EAA for short, released a virtual flight academy aimed towards virtual instruction. It's a two-stage program with discounted prices for EAA members. Stage 1 focuses on pre-solo content, and Stage 2 covers crosswind operations, emergencies, and other testing materials. You will need a computer, hardware, and a license to Flight Simulator X Steam Edition, the older version of Microsoft Flight Simulator. If you meet these requirements, this is a nice program to test attention to detail in critical phases of flight and prioritize focus. In the past, I've presented the hardware section with all products falling into categories such as all the variants of yokes that are available or rudder pedals. Today I'm going to take a different angle and I'm going to discuss the hardware brands and pieces that each vendor offers and the pros and cons of their design/brand. I'll preface this section by pointing out that all the pieces we'll cover today are recognized by today's prominent software options, and you are not required to use family branded items for your simulator. So you can absolutely use a Honeycomb yoke with a Logitech throttle and CH rudder pedals to round it out. They will work together. The brands we're going to cover are CH Products, Thrustmaster, Logitech, formerly known as Satec, Honeycomb, Noble Flight Simulation, Flight Velocity, and lastly, Redbird. And in keeping up with the anatomy analogies, think of the flight control hardware as the muscle and nervous system of our flight simulator. We're going to start the hardware chapter with a focus on CH Products line of flight simulator hardware. CH Products is one of the longest lasting brands we'll cover today, and you can find some of these pieces featured in our print catalogs from the mid-90s. The CH brand is mainly plastic, therefore reducing weight, but also slightly reducing durability and feel of flow of travel. CH offers both a flight stick or a yoke option for flight orientation realism. And what's unique about the CH Products yoke and throttle on the top right is that this one piece contains roll and pitch control with the yoke head, but we also have a concise control of throttle, prop, and mixture on the top of the yoke. If you're looking for a lot of features in a small design, the CH yoke and throttle is worth reviewing. If you want to add in yaw or rudder control, look below to the all-in-one flight simulator yoke with bumper paddles on either side of the yoke face. When those paddles are configured for yaw control, you have a single system offering all flight axes and engine controls in one unit. CH also offers a multi-engine throttle if you'd like to practice dual engine profiles or run those enjoyable identify, verify, feather simulated emergencies. They also offer a standalone throttle quadrant, which is helpful if you're pairing this with another brand yoke or stick which doesn't offer throttle controls. All of the CH products offer multiple two-way switches or hat switches to offer multiple levels of customization for your simulator. Thrustmaster is the newest line of hardware that Sporty's offers, and I truly wish we had started working with them earlier. The Thrustmaster brand originated from engineers and pilots from the US Air Force, Navy, and NASA, and because the early developers pulled from those distinguished departments, they bring a serious level of precision and quality to their hardware. The Thrustmaster HOTAS 1 is a very impressive piece compared to its price. It incorporates a stick, which we can see on the right of the image, and a breakaway throttle on the left to allow engine management and secondary flight control personalization. Say you want to simulate flying a Cirrus SR-22, you can move the stick to the left side of your simulator and the throttle body to the right, and you're in a more realistic layout. The Thrustmaster Side Stick Airbus Edition is one of their latest offerings, and if the title didn't give it away, this is an Airbus partnered item that Thrustmaster has been working on for a while, and it's actually a 1-to-1 ratio of the side stick you'll find in the Airbus A320neo. The top of the stick buttons, red on right and black on the left, can be interchanged so as to offer both captain and first officer setup. The stick has a twist control incorporated, allowing control of yaw, and there's also a slider at the base allowing throttle control if this is your standalone piece. Now, if you want to add some realism to your Airbus setup, then the Thrustmaster Quadrant Airbus Edition is a must. This piece is a 8:10 ratio to the real thing and allows engine start controls in addition to a very realistic lever. What I first noticed are the multiple detentes on this piece, identical to what is in the Airbus design. Those detentes, or natural resting points for the levers, are idle, climb, flex, and toga, or take off, go around. These are both great pieces, and if you'd like to save a little bit of money, you can purchase the officer package for immediate savings. Thrustmaster also offers two options for rudder pedals. The first are the piece that I currently have configured on my flight simulator, which are the standard Thrustmaster flight rudder pedals. They have a realistic sliding motion similar to the Cessna 172 I'm used to, and they incorporate a magnetic internal technology designed to reduce wear and tear, which seems like a no-brainer. The TPR pedals are the opposite end of the spectrum. These things are professional grade with a capital P. They come in at a hefty 25 pounds, and it's due to the robust design and feature set of these pedals. These pedals are designed after what you'll find in a Boeing aircraft, and you have the ability to customize the distance of travel of each pedal, as well as footwell angles. If you want to take advantage of the sound effects of flight simulators or work on your communication skills, then the Air Force branded flight simulator headset is a great option. At the request of our customer service, I would like to mention that this headset will not work in a real life airplane. Kid you not, we've had a few customers ask about that. Closing out the Thrustmaster brand, we have the Flight Simulator Flight Deck Stand. This is a great piece to assist in arranging all of our flight simulator hardware, and with a centered base to assist platform and secondary levels on the left and right of the stand, in addition to an angled footwell for rudder pedals, this is a great way to up the design of your flight simulator setup. Moving along, Logitech is the most popular brand of flight simulator products here at Sporty's, and it's partially because we carry so many different hardware options from them, but also because they are the most in-stock flight sim pieces we sell. I've come to learn that having availability is a necessity when talking flight sim gear, and all the Logitech pieces in this presentation are in stock as of this morning. We'll begin with the foundation piece, the Logitech yoke and throttle. This package offers a great yoke with a digital clock on the front face for timed procedure options, in addition to other timed maneuvers. This piece also offers a wired 3-lever throttle body covering engine management with 3 two-way buttons on the base of the throttle. Most often, those buttons are configured for gear position or flap settings. All features covered, this is a great yoke and throttle to get someone digitally airborne fast. For yaw control, Logitech also offers a rudder pedal design with configurable footwells for comfortability, in addition to a center knob, which will change the resistance. Let's say you buy the Logitech yoke and throttle, but instead of a single engine airplane, you want to fly a multi. Well, you can add the additional Logitech throttle quadrant and place it right next to the initial throttle, and you'll have a 6-lever configuration. With just a few minutes of system programming and quick changing of the black, blue, and red knobs on top of the throttle, you'll have a great multi-engine setup. Logitech also offers a great flight sim joystick with twist control for yaw and throttle control with the lever at the base of the stick. This is our lowest priced hardware piece, but do not take that as it is our cheapest. I would be hard pressed to find someone who regrets buying the stick, and for this week only, it's actually on sale. Logitech also offers a higher end stick with a standalone single lever throttle in the X52 system. This stick and throttle holds the crown of most configurable flight sim piece we offer due to all the hat switches, two-way toggle buttons, axes levers, and tension springs. This is a really complex piece and one I would recommend for the simmer who wants to really customize their digital flying for the maximum number of inputs. Logitech also offers some great peripheral pieces, that of which I'll define as not required to get the airplane airborne, but to someone who wants to utilize a flight simulator as a tool rather than a toy, they can't be overlooked. The ForeFlight radio panel is a great way to configure the radio stack in your digital airplane and adds an obvious level of realism to a sim setup. The multi-panel is great with an autopilot system that will help reduce the flying workload, in addition to a vertical trim wheel for a clean flight profile. And lastly, the switch panel is a great piece, including magneto control, master switches, avionics switches, light switches, in addition to other customizable two-way switches, and a gear lever with position indicator lights. These are helpful pieces aimed at increasing the realism of your at-home flight simulator. Where to begin with Honeycomb branded items? The Alpha Yoke debuted in October of 2019 and has met overwhelming interest from the flight sim community. Here we are almost a year and a half after it went live, and we still have trouble keeping this yoke in stock, and reasonably so. The Honeycomb yoke has a very realistic travel due to using ball bearings in the internals along with a cord design rather than bands. It also has a full 90 degrees of travel right and left from natural center, which is unique in the yoke simulator world. Front of the housing face includes light switches, master switches, avionics switches, and a 5-position magneto switch to help with cold starts. The flight sim community loves this piece, and to remedy the lack of engine management options on the yoke, Honeycomb debuted a throttle body a little over a month ago that has surpassed the interest levels of the Alpha. The Bravo throttle has 6 levers, all of which can have their tension changed with the dial on the right side of the throttle. Each lever head is removable and can be configured for the multi-GA setting we see above, a single complex or a single non-complex setting. But Honeycomb realized they didn't want a GA ceiling on the abilities of this throttle, so they included additional commercial levers covering 2 or 4 engine settings, a speed brake lever, and a flaps lever. That alone is impressive, but they also threw in a trim wheel on the left side of the yoke, a gear lever with a 3-light position indicator, a flap handle on the right side of the yoke, 14 indication annunciator panel, and lastly, but certainly not least, an autopilot control towards the top of the throttle body with a selector on the left, activation keys for each variable we desire to set, and an incremental knob on the right. This is an extremely potent piece, and if you are able to get your hands on one, I'm sure it's going to bring a smile to your face. Next, we have the Noble Flight Simulation brand, which is focused on the serious pilots out there. The Flight Sim yoke feels and reacts like it was pulled right out of an SR-22. The 45-degree resting angle and travel of roll inputs, in addition to pitch, has Sporty's in-house serious pilot stating, quote, "This is 95% accurate to what I feel in my airplane," end quote. Included mounting hardware and programming make sure that this yoke will meet or exceed your expectations for a Cirrus-styled flight simulator piece. But you're also going to need a Cirrus-styled throttle control to go with your yoke, and therein lies the NFS Cirrus Center Console. This hardware behemoth uses 18-gauge steel in its design, assuring sturdiness. It incorporates adjustable friction for throttle and mixture motion, flap switch with realistic LED color and delayed timing, toga button on throttle hand, left, right, or off fuel selector lever, and a USB hub for easy cable management. If your desire is to solidify flows in different phases of flight in a digital Cirrus aircraft, NFS is the brand for you. Here we have Flight Velocity that offers some great peripherals to organize your simulator or offer an overlooked feature. The mid-profile simulator cockpit panel is a great way to organize all flight sim hardware you've acquired for your build. I need to throw out the disclaimer that this panel does not include all the pieces you see in that image. It is the housing for these pieces and the pre-cut paneling you can just make out on the left side of this image. If you don't want to put the whole panel, but would like to stabilize your iPad on your flight simulator, the iPad mount is a great option. The Flight Velocity trim wheel is a superb add-on to any flight sim setup and helps to control an ever-important feature of controlled flight, your airplane's trim setting. The trim wheel in the top right was the first variation. It has been discontinued, at least on our site, and as those units leave our warehouse, we will shift to offering the Trim Wheel Pro, which improves on the base design with a knob on the top right of the housing. That knob allows us to instantaneously change the amount of input our trim wheel conveys to the simulator, even while we're in flight. If you're in a Cessna 172 and the trim profile isn't changing at a realistic rate because you're just in a, say, 747, you can slowly rotate the knob to increase or decrease the wheel sensitivity and increase the wheel's accuracy. This is a really great piece from a great company. The final line of flight simulator hardware that we're going to cover is the Redbird brand out of Austin, Texas. These pieces are almost identical to what you will find in an actual airplane. The majority, if not all the components, are metal, and their sense of realism is unparalleled. The alloy yoke has a very durable design, and once you've successfully hoisted it onto your desk, it's sure to offer a high level of detail to your simulated flight. The Redbird rudder pedals are in the same boat, offering extremely smooth travel of each pedal, and the non-slip pads on the bottom complete the state-of-the-art design, fixing an all too familiar problem with pedals slipping and sliding on the floor. The Redbird single throttle in vernier style is the only push-pull throttle that we offer and is an obvious show of dedication towards simming if you fly or log hours in a Cessna 172 or some kind of similar bird. This throttle also includes gear handle and flaps lever in the applicable locations. And if you prefer the systems of an Archer or a Bonanza, then the lever style is the ideal one for your setup. Redbird recognized that they would also need multi-engine options within their premier line of products and put together the Alloy Twin Throttle. This is another great hardware piece to practice identify, verify, and feather, while also incorporating a gear lever, a flap lever, and for the first time, a rudder trim switch. For professional level layouts, Redbird offers the Horizon side monitors, which include 2 screens and the necessary mounting hardware. They also offer a reinforced TD table to safely support these hardware options. Also, if you want to fly your simulator with the same headset that you use in your airplane, they offer a headset connect with PJ plug receivers, allowing another increase in realism and tricking your head and ears into thinking you're in an actual airplane. Okay, so we've successfully combed through our options for building a flight simulator piece by piece, but what if we want to order an entire package and have everything we need with one transaction? Well, we've got that option also. In addition to offering professional grade individual pieces, Redbird offers multiple flight simulator kits ranging from the entry-level needs up to a basic aviation training device, which are eligible for logging recency. We'll start at the beginning with the Redbird Alloy Flight Simulator Complete Kit, including the previously mentioned yoke, rudder, and push-pull throttle quadrant. A computer and software will be required to complete this setup, but once you have those two taken care of, you're ready to go fly. The Redbird J is the next step in Redbird flight simulators. This option includes a computer, a screen, and pre-installed prepared flight sim software. All that's required is a desk to hold the components, an electrical input, and high-speed internet. The Redbird Alloy Kit retails for just under $2,000, and the Redbird J is yours for about $2,600. The Redbird J Velocity builds on the Redbird J model by adding highly robust internal components in addition to upgraded computing power for high reliability. The J Velocity was designed for demanding environments such as museums or public access kiosks. So the reinforced internals and increased computing power goes a really long way. The Redbird TD Flight Simulator is in a league of its own. The TD includes one cockpit configuration, either steam or glass panel, a computer, instrument panel, switch panel, monitor, keyboard, and speakers. The TD will fit perfectly in a small flight school when recreating lessons or cleaning up a debrief. It's also a great option for at-home use to keep skills and flows fluid. The J Velocity retails for $3,995 and the TD goes for $6,995. Next, we come to the Redbird TD2 flight simulator. The TD2 carries everything the TD offers in addition to the option to fly with or without retractable landing gear, a constant speed propeller, and a high performance engine. The TD2 offers a steam gauge configuration paired with a Garmin 530 style GPS and CAP 140 style autopilot, or a glass configuration in a G1000 layout with a GFC 700 style autopilot. The top of the line TD2 is out the door for $7,995. Now, one of the most common questions I'm asked when talking about simulators are, how do I log my training, or how do I stay current? During the summer of 2018, the FAA announced some changes aimed towards making it easier for pilots to keep their instrument currency using an aviation training device, or ATD for short. When a Redbird TD, or TD2, is paired with rudder pedals, it qualifies as an ATD. FAR 61.51 was amended to remove any reference to a flight instructor so pilots can fly instrument flights at home without scheduling an instructor. FAR 61.51 reads, a person may use time in a full flight simulator, flight training device, or aviation training device for satisfying instrument currency experience requirements, provided a logbook or training record is maintained to specify the training device, time, and the content. In addition, FAR 61.57 was also amended to allow a flight simulator, flight training device, or aviation training device to be used for maintaining instrument experience, which covers the familiar 6 approaches. FAR 61.57 reads, provided the device represents the category of aircraft for the instrument rating, privileges to be maintained, and the pilot performs the tasks and iterations in simulated instrument conditions, a person may complete the instrument experience in any combination of an aircraft, full flight simulator, flight training device, or aviation training device. Long story short, if we have a basic aircraft training device, either the TD or TD2, and we pair it with rudder pedals, we are able to log instrument experience for instrument training or currency without an instructor. This is a great way to stay instrument current when those seasonal months preclude us from getting in the air. So now that we've covered the body of a flight simulator, let's focus on what we can actually do with said system. I believe it's important to cover 2 quick points before we dive into simulator abilities. Number 1, if you are serious about using the simulator as a tool to stay current or fluid in the procedures of flying an airplane, then don't cut corners and operate the plane just like you would in the real world. Begin the session on the ramp with engines off. Run your checklist and start the engine, test brakes, perform a run-up, talk on the radio, tune your altimeter. The more we add to our simulated flying world, that brings us closer to real-life tendencies, the more effective this system will be at keeping you sharp. And number 2, no matter how much money you throw into a simulator, you will not attain real-world quality flying. Plain and simple. You're never going to fly by the seat of your pants in a simulator. You will never smell a change in the cabin to indicate an engine issue. You won't understand the appreciation for going full power and feeling cold airflow on your face during balmy summer days. We must observe the simulator as a way to strengthen a muscle, not to learn an exercise. And with that being said, a simulator can be a great tool towards staying proficient and up to date on current systems, in addition to being fun. There are 4 categories we're going to discuss when it comes to scenarios for a simulator. Number 1 will be VFR maneuvers, followed by IFR maneuvers. Third, we have emergencies. And lastly, we have fun flying. Just as I recommended preparing for takeoff as you would in the plane, I also recommend clearing turns before practicing maneuvers. I know this seems trivial, but to stay true to realism and as a muscle memory warm-up towards the real thing, I do advise it. When it comes to maneuvers, I like to mention a few that would make you sweat a little bit if it was real life. With a simulator, we have the ability to practice/simulate the more demanding maneuvers in a safe environment so that we can focus on critiquing and improving these tasks without the tandem real-life necessity of keeping an airplane airborne. Power on stalls. These used to guarantee I would have a sweaty shirt during our debrief, but eventually became pretty fun. With a simulator teetering on the edge of a stall, don't be afraid to see what happens when you kick the rudder full deflection in a power on stall, but only start tweaking that maneuver once you have mastered it. Crosswind approach and landing. This can be a great maneuver aimed towards input versus reaction and really seeing what some strong crosswinds can do. Take the wind up to your plane's maximum tested level and see just how hard it is to land the airplane in those conditions. Rejected takeoff. The rejected takeoff may seem like a waste of time, but it is a good skill to practice, and you can even try aborting the takeoff at continuously later stages of the takeoff roll. VFR into IFR. This maneuver is meant to give the VFR pilot a taste of what instrument flying is like. Nonetheless, it's a good maneuver to practice in a simulator by flying into a wall of overcast clouds and slowly flying a 180-degree turn while maintaining altitude and airspeed. Mountain flying with a Ricard chandelle. The chandelle, which means candle in French, is believed to have originated in dogfighting and allowed the pilot to reverse direction in minimum radius climbing turn. This was actually my favorite maneuver throughout my training, and my request to fly one on my check ride somewhat took the examiner by surprise. Although a Cessna 172 will never be the plane of choice for a dogfight, you can apply this maneuver to mountain flying. If you find yourself in a crevice and realize the walls are closing in around you, this is the advised maneuver to turn back the way you came in the smallest lateral footprint. Try simulating one in the Smoky Mountains and see how your plane reacts. Takeoff and landing at a very high density altitude airport. Once you become accustomed to the takeoff roll in your simulated 172 at a home airport in normal conditions, go take off from an airport with a high elevation, or find one around 3000 MSL and crank outside air temperature to 100 degrees and bring the barometric pressure down to 29.5. This will greatly reduce the performance of the engine and in turn strengthen your takeoff roll. It is eye-opening the first time you simulate this scenario with full tanks. Also, before I move on, the majority of the images I've used for maneuvers thus far are from the Sporty's Learn to Fly course. And if you are looking for an index of flight maneuvers, in addition to HD videos for all phases of flight, I recommend checking out this course. We've also recently added a private pilot flight sim training guide to our Learn to Fly course, which offers simulator training flights to complement our course. Next, we'll increase the challenge with some IFR maneuvers, and first up is the 0-0 takeoff. Now, I've never actually flown a 0-0 takeoff, but I simulated over a dozen while training, and I've flown about just as many in the simulator. This is a great challenge for rudder control on takeoff and also tracking desired heading once you've left the ground. Intercepting and tracking VOR radials is a maneuver aimed towards precision in navigating, which is a requisite when flying IFR. A simulator is a great way to quickly test the sensitivity of intersecting a radial 30 miles out from the source versus 5 miles out. Holding procedures and entry can be a very intimidating portion of IFR flight, but through repetition and some mental math, they become secondhand. Try flying holds off a created waypoint and then upgrade to flying holding procedures off of missed approaches. Try flying a timed hold rather than a distance-based hold for brownie points. The DME arc is a rare maneuver, but still a challenging one, and once completely understood allows for better navigational abilities. GPS fails in flight, but the airport has a VOR. Fly a DME arc at a safe altitude until heading is within 5 degrees perpendicular to the runway heading radial, then turn inbound, and you should be on a long final. ILS down to minimums is the IFR maneuver I try and fly once a week. If I ever find myself in a scenario where I need to land at an airport with weather just above minimums, I want to have this procedure down pat. For added challenge, I'll sometimes throw a crosswind in once 3 miles out to keep my scan inside the plane from getting fixated, while also searching for those lights outside the airplane. The circling approach procedure is one of the least used approaches in the world of localizer and RNAV approaches, but it is still a useful scenario to practice. Emergencies. Now, I would like to pause a quick second and explain the different approach I take when it comes to training for emergencies. All the maneuvers we've covered thus far are tasks we can look forward to flying in the airplane or in the digital world, but when it comes to emergencies, we train for these so that if we ever experience one, we are absolutely prepared for it. If you are a pilot and wanting to use a simulator to strengthen emergency flows, I can't stress enough the value of chair flying and learning the concrete flows before jumping into a digital simulator. Once you know all the required steps to attempt a restart and then secure the engine, if you ever see this above sight picture, then you're prepared to simulate the emergency and see how different inputs yield different results in this critical phase of flight. All right, now that the disclaimer is out of the way, let's discuss a few of my favorite emergencies to simulate. The emergency approach and landing is the most probable emergency we will see as aviators. Whether from fuel starvation or engine failure, it's good to know the best glide of your airplane and find out the range and approach that works for your bird. Just as we can practice an emergency approach and landing in real training, we should save the engine failure during climb out maneuver for the simulator. What to do in this scenario should be covered in every departure briefing, but here we are actually able to test what would happen to the airplane and what our sight picture would be. Try neutralizing the engine at 200 feet AGL, then 400, then try 600, then try 800. Try killing the engine just as you reach pattern altitude and see if you have the maneuverability to make the 180-degree turn back to the runway. Now run that same cycle and throw a 12-knot direct crosswind into the mix. As you can see, this is a great maneuver to practice in the simulator. Electrical failure at night is an extreme nuisance, and they test our ability to aviate, navigate, and communicate. Simulate shutting off the electrical system over a busy area like Manhattan. Then try the same emergency over rural Oklahoma. Ground lighting will affect ability to fly the plane noticeably, and it's a better lesson to learn in a simulator than in the real world. Emergency descents are a very fun maneuver in real life and in the flight simulator. They simulate if we have an emergency with a passenger and need to land at an airport beneath us while in cruise. It's a great test of airspeed control and creates a sight picture that is very rare in flying. Power off 360 accuracy approach is a great test of control of the plane and analyzing all your numbers to make sure you can make the landing where you would like to. This maneuver is taught in the commercial phase of training, and its execution requires great control of the plane and energy. IFR flight with pitot blockage may be one of the most dangerous emergencies in my eyes. When you're flying along and you lose an engine, whether in VFR or IFR, you know it from the loss of noise. When the electrical system goes out, it's glaringly obvious. When the pitot port is blocked, it's difficult to diagnose because you have other instruments providing information that can counter what the airspeed indicator is telling you. I've spoken to a few pilots who've experienced this condition, and while they were appreciative of their training, they are glad that the numbers say they'll never experience that again. And now that we've covered emergencies, let's discuss one of the main reasons people buy a flight simulator: some fun flying. A simulator offers the joy of partaking in a flight we otherwise wouldn't have the logistical, financial, or maybe legal ability to fly. The simulator opens that door to us. First mission I'll throw out is Lindbergh's transatlantic flight. Now, I'd recommend a faster airplane that can make that distance so you don't have to run your simulator for 33.5 hours. But if you want to designate a weekend to it, fly away. The latest update of the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 program greatly improved the detail of the United Kingdom and Ireland. With over 70 new points of interest and updated visuals, you can spend countless hours exploring these high-definition areas and sites. And with my last name, you better believe I've logged a few exploring Ireland. Follow in Cal Rogers' footsteps by retracing the 4,000-mile transcontinental flight. As you can tell from the picture above, this milestone was made in the early days of aviation, 1911 to be exact, but he solidified his spot in aviation history. Now, sadly, Cal Rogers passed away the year after his accomplishment, but a quick Google of the flight legs he flew over 100 years ago and a retracement of those steps is a tribute to his adventurous nature. Continuing with aviation history, it should be required in order to consider yourself an aviator to have landed at Devil Hills Kitty Hawk in North Carolina. This is where the Wright brothers chiseled their way into worldly history. Now, you may not be able to walk through the Wright Brothers National Memorial Visitor Center in a simulator, but you can observe this aviation bedrock from the air. Add a little bit of time to your flight and approach from the south to enjoy the Outer Banks. Along with the Scottish theme flight, head about 1,200 nautical miles south and enjoy flying the beautiful African countryside from a low altitude. Giraffes might be hard to find, but I'm sure some great sunset views are aplenty. Last fun flying scenario and least legal scenario is to enjoy the Eiffel Tower at night. Now, I haven't experienced the joy of viewing this old radio tower in person yet, but I know it would be fun to see from the skies at night, and a simulator may be the only way to do that. All right, now let's discuss this new Microsoft Flight Simulator program in a little bit more detail. Program debuted 6 months ago last Thursday, as I previously mentioned, and in that short time span, there have been hundreds of millions of digital flying hours logged by international users. There's over 2 terabytes of data invested into making sure planet Earth looks and responds. When I say responds, think reflections on water or surface wind patterns, to make this a serious simulator rather than a game. I will admit that there are some things Microsoft and the development team at Asobo Studios need to fix, but I'm going to highlight just a few entry-level things they got right that pilots or students can use to complement their training. First up is flight planning. Microsoft Flight Sim took heed from the superb flight planning applications and programs that are currently in general aviation use and partnered with NavBlue to incorporate navigation data pertinent to flight. The data is updated every 28 days and creates a helpful launch page from which to give your flight a beginning, middle, and end. Let's say we want to fly from Los Angeles International Airport to Santa Barbara Municipal in a Cessna 172. From the World Maps page, we select a 172 on the top left of the page, type KLAX in the departure airport, and KSBA in arrival airport. The default setting is a GPS direct, and we're also provided distance and time to complete computed off the aircraft we have selected. Other route options are via VOR. We also have low altitude IFR airways and high altitude airways. We also have the ability to add an airport or waypoint to our route to simulate real world application. You'll see a Navlog tab towards the top right of the screen, and this is where we can plan out the vertical profile of our flight rather than just the lateral. Our waypoints are organized with heading, distance, and altitude. We have the ability to set our cruising altitude, as you can see on the upper right area. Our desired frequency, predicted speed, and time until next waypoint are also provided. This is an immensely helpful page for flight planning as a student, and it looks eerily similar to my VFR flight plan forms. Next, we're going to cover the weight and balance calculation feature. For our familiar 172, I've punched in some basic numbers, 50% fuel with 2 pilots, and our total to max takeoff weight is calculated at the very bottom. Our center of gravity is shown on the right with limits provided. Now let's go ahead and fully fill the fuel tanks, exchange some weight between the 2 pilots, and add a passenger. You'll see as our total to max takeoff weight ratio has drastically changed. We're now at 96.6% of payload, and our center of gravity has moved further aft. Let's again add another passenger, and we're visually alerted that we're over max payload and takeoff weight. But let's not forget everyone's golf clubs and bags in the cargo hold. And now we're also given a visual clue on the right side of the screen that our CG is out of its limits. Although we can't edit the max numbers to reflect the plane we train in or the one currently in our hangar, this is a very helpful tool to understand what weight edits do and will also allow us to simulate what an aft CG takeoff feels like. Failures is a great feature that we can practice in the simulator and add an air of randomness to. The failure options change depending on the complexity of an airplane. Think multiple engines. But for a Cessna 172, we have a complete engine failure, oil system failure, oil leak, fuel pump, and if we scroll down, we would see engine fire as an option. We are able to designate a window of time when said emergency will occur, therefore nullifying any anticipation and getting us closer to a real life failure, which we never know is going to occur. This feature keeps us from getting complacent and should be switched on randomly with large windows for consistent critiquing of our emergency procedure flows. I could easily fill an entire webinar of today's length discussing everything that Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 offers, but to stay on point, I'll conclude that this is a very powerful program that offers immense value. In addition to the flight planning, weight and balance, or failure features, there's a lot to be said for joy flying. Whether lassoing the Eiffel Tower in a Bonanza, exploring the Grand Canyon in a Savage Cub, getting an aerial view of the Hoover Dam in a DA-62, floating around the Sydney Opera House in the A5, practicing those steep turns in a Cessna 172. And side note, I practiced a 45-degree bank steep turn in a Cessna 172 about a month after the program came out, so back in September, and I was quite disappointed with the aerodynamics. I practiced this same maneuver a week ago and was pleasantly surprised that the expected performance has improved. This is a testament to the fact that this program is maturing and growing into a great training tool, and you can easily lose track of time with this simulator, of which I'm continuously guilty of. Many pilots in Sporty's office grew up with earlier renditions of this program, and I'd like to think that this new version will charge a new batch of interested aviators who hopefully take that next step with an introductory flight, leading to a first solo, and additional certifications and ratings to follow. Finally, we'll cover a couple flight simulator complements that would fall into the software category but aren't required for a flight simulator. We're going to start with VATSIM, which stands for Virtual Air Traffic Simulation Network. This is a network you can join with your flight simulator and fly around the world with other sim enthusiasts, communicating with live air traffic controllers, tower operators, and other airplanes. Every plane you see in that screenshot above is a simmer flying around the continental US. It is a great way to keep radio skills proficient and yield the most from your flight sim experience. The platform is completely free and boasts over 79,000 members. Pilot Edge is somewhat similar to VATSIM in network design. The main difference is that the sim controllers are real-world air traffic controllers. This brings a high level of professionalism and realism to Pilot Edge. Therefore, subscriptions start at $19.95 monthly, but allow savings through annual subscription. Both are valuable training tools for an extremely important and perishable skill required in the airplane. ForeFlight is a phenomenal system to pair with any flight simulator. The ability to track a flight's location, performance, and even add AHRS is absolutely great. I personally rarely simulate flights anymore without running ForeFlight in concert. Their track log feature allows analysis of the flight, which is beneficial to clean up problematic areas and improve ability in the airplane. It's an ideal way to review maneuvers and emergency performance. On the left screen, you can see a little bit before the 9 a.m. mark, I simulated an engine out scenario about 7 miles from Wilmington at 3,500 MSL. I made it easy on myself by experiencing the engine failure when I was lined up perfectly with the runway. I can assure you my next scenario won't be so easy. On the right, I departed Sporty's and flew over to Lunken for the 2-1 left ILS approach. To stay true to training, you can see the outbound leg and the lasso towards the top of the picture, indicating the outbound and inbound intercept. My airspeed and altitude were a little shaky early on, but I feel confident I made up for it when I pegged that glide slope towards the end. This was also a scenario where I edited the overcast clouds to break when I was about 150 feet above minimums. I'm constantly testing out new features on ForeFlight with the Infinite Flight app I have on my phone, looking to better understand the latest ForeFlight features, say 3D traffic or the visual icing layers. I can run a simulated flight on my phone and experience those new features while typing an email. I highly recommend ForeFlight as an add-on to your simulator, and as updates continue, the features will continue to increase the benefits for the sim community as well as pilots. In closing, I like to put the homework to everyone who is considering a flight simulator to ask themselves two questions. When it comes to a future simulator, first question is, am I going to use this as a toy for a fun pastime or a way to fill the weekend stuck inside? Or am I going to use it as a tool to strengthen my abilities? Am I just going to turn it on and see where the 172 takes me? Or will I have a mission for each cycle I fly to keep the rust from accruing? Second question, how much can I spend on this simulator? Usually this number is very dependent on your answer to that first question, but if you're serious about it, really consider the quality of the machine you want to help with your flying. And if it's used correctly, it will save you money, training, and headache down the road. All of the products we've covered today are available at sportyspilotshop.com. On the horizontal black bar, you will see a tab for flight simulators. Highlighting that tab will categorize all flight simulator products available in addition to flight simulator blogs on the left-hand pane. A significant number of the digital images I used today for maneuvers and emergencies are from our Learn to Fly course. And if you're looking to learn why a plane reacts the way it does, review maneuvers, or study for a written test, I would highly recommend browsing the Learn to Fly course. If you would like additional advice or assistance in planning out a flight simulator, please send me an email at flightsim@sporties.com or call our customer service at the number listed. Lastly, you can expect a follow-up email tomorrow thanking you for your attendance today. We will include a link to the recording of today's video in addition to some of the products we've covered, and also a link to our new Flight Simulator Central page, which is a great starting point for any and all flight simulator questions. And with that, my presentation has concluded. I'd like to thank everyone for their time. And Doug, I believe we may have a couple questions.
Oh, we sure do, Chris. And thank you very much for all the great information. Your expertise as a pilot and a simmer just flows from that presentation every time we give it. So thank you very much for putting that together. We have a couple questions in regards to avionics training. A lot of people are looking to train with G1000s, 430, 530s, 650s, 750s. The question is, how much of that stuff is in Flight Sim 2020? And are there any peripherals that we can be purchased for Flight Sim 2020 yet to use a G1000 or 650, 750?
That is a great question. You know, a lot of people will use a flight simulator to better understand their avionics. And I can speak from the software side. Microsoft is continuously updating the logic of all of their aircraft's avionics. When I'm flying a majority of my time in a Cessna 172, I can tell you that the G1000 operates the way it is supposed to. So they are dedicating a lot of time and focus into making sure that what's inside the airplane operates the way it should in real life. From a hardware perspective, I highly recommend Real Sim Gear. It's a company that creates physical designs, say the Garmin 530 or 430. They also have the G1000. They've since started doing some of the later versions, but they've put a lot of physical effort into making these hardware pieces that you could therefore put on your desk and have an accurate, applicable, Garmin 530, 430, 1000, whatever your heart desires. And those, again, are great training pieces because you're able to figure out what your avionics panel does while on the ground, rather than when you're up in the air costing you a leg and an arm.
Thank you, Chris. You know, Garmin was one topic, the avionics. when it comes to Garmin, but the other one that came up in quite a few questions is ForeFlight. And how do I pair my ForeFlight to use with FlightSim? Is there maybe an article on our blog site that you could point us towards, or a quick 1, 2, 3 step guide to get my ForeFlight to work with FlightSim?
We do have articles on our website that covers all the ways to pair ForeFlight in addition to a couple other EFBs. With X-Plane 11, it works with a couple clicks, which is extremely convenient. With some of the other simulator softwares, you have to get an add-on driver, which may add 10 to 15 minutes and take up a couple megs of storage. But if you really want to make sure your simulator works with ForeFlight, it should take you less than 10 minutes. And again, we have a few articles on this on our website and on our new FlightSim Central page.
Perfect, Chris. Those are the two main questions we got. It all has to do with integrating avionics and whatnot with our flight simulator. That concludes our presentation today on what pilot needs to know about flight simulators. You can find this presentation recorded on sportys.com/webinars. If you have any questions, feel free to contact Chris via that email address that he posted up there, flightsim@sportys.com. Thank you all for joining us and have a great day.